Welcome everyone to the April meeting of the Orange Branch Historical Society. I think most of us are here today because for some reason we became interested in the Orange Branch. And yet there is not an incredible amount of literature on the Orange Branch, but that seems to be changing. Bill McKelvey is working on a book, and I was also fortunate enough to be among the select few to read Kevin Olson's unprinted manuscript. Everyone welcome Kevin Olson. Not only is Kevin here today, but tomorrow he will be giving a presentation at the Greenwood Lake Library. That will be at 1 p.m. So welcome, Kevin.
Thank you very much, and thank you. Thank you for this invitation. When I was first contacted, I felt a little bit intimidated because between Bill McKelvey, Jim Costabas, and some of the members who are very knowledgeable about the oranges, was like, whoa, what possibly could I say? Or can I contribute to this? So that's why I decided to talk a little bit about more of the more obscure topics. And that is, why was there an Orange Branch in the first place? What was going on in New Jersey that required the construction of an Orange Branch? Why did this make any sense? Let's continue, please. Next slide. Yeah, we're kind of, we have some trouble with the internet settings on my computer. So we have the presentation running on another computer, but I'm talking on yeah. Anyway, next slide, please. Okay, if we want to understand the Orange Branch and where it came about, we have to go back to the very beginning of railroading in New Jersey with the construction of the Camden and Amboy Railroad between the Amboys in along the Raritan River and the Hudson Raritan Estuary, and Camden across the river from Philadelphia. You could see it in this as the red line of this map. This railroad was one of the first built in New Jersey. It dates to 1834. And most importantly, the the Camden and Amboy gave New Jersey 2,000 shares of stock. The earnings from that 2,000 shares of stock were enough to pay the entire state budget for the year of 1832. And the earnings from that stock allowed the New Jersey government, or persuaded the New Jersey government, to give the Camden and Amboy Railroad exclusive rights to link the Hudson and Delaware rivers. So until the 1860s, no other railroad had the legal authority to link the Hudson and the Delaware rivers. So now, if you were a railroad builder, such as the promoters of the New Jersey Railroad and Transportation Company, what are you going to do? So the New Jersey Railroad and Transportation Company, 1837, is shown as the purple line in this map. And they began building westward from Jersey City across the Meadowlands through Newark. And what are you going to do? There's already another railroad with the exclusive right to build all the way across New Jersey. So what you did was you turned south and you connected the eastern terminal of the Camden and Amboy with the Hudson River waterfront. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next railroad that enters the picture is the Morris and Essex, which is the one we're going to talk about today because this is the railroad that really gave birth to the Orange Branch. The locomotive you're seeing here is the Orange. It was constructed by Seth Boyden, Newark inventor and machinist. And it was the first the Orange and the Essex were the first two locomotives on the Morris and Essex Railroad. And the plan was to build west from Newark, ultimately to linking Morristown and the hinterlands of New Jersey. Now, the Orange was a widely celebrated locomotive, very well known among historians, but she was woefully underpowered. And if you know Newark, you know that immediately to the west of Newark is a mountain. At the time, it was called Turkey Hill. It is now the location of the town of Summit. So the Morris and Essex's Orange and Essex could barely make it up Turkey Hill with a full tank of water. They only were able to pull two cars up the hill. So frequently, what had to happen was one car was left at the bottom of the hill while the locomotive got a running start and climbed the hill, then had to take on water, go back down the hill, get the other car, had to take on water, and only then could they continue westward. There was a single horse drawn passenger car that trundled back and forth between Orange and the city of Newark when the steam locomotive during the daytime when the Morris and the Orange and the Essex were not running. Next slide, please. So here is the view of Orange in 18 it was engraved in 1865. The railroad arrived in Orange in 1836. Next slide. And then in 1837, the railroad reached Madison. Next slide, please. And I think the locomotive shown in that woodcut on the previous slide was this one, the Speedwell, which was constructed by the Baldwin Locomotive Works with the input of Stephen Vail at the Speedwell furnace. This was the third locomotive owned by the railroad. Next slide, please. And finally, they reached Morristown and the Speedwell Iron Works by 1838. And you can see from these maps that there was quite a large number of facilities for the railroad in Morristown. If you look on the map on the left side of the screen, you'll see it was serving a coal yard. There was a passenger depot, a freight depot, a water tank, a turntable, and engine house. And then the railroad continued westward over the Whippany River. Next slide, please. So, what was it like to travel from Morristown on these first trains? Well, there were only two trains a day. The eastbound trains left at 7 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. The westbound trains went from Jersey City to Morristown. There was a single locomotive and, excuse me, a locomotive, a single passenger car, and the total trip time was about 2.5 hours. So it wasn't exactly a quick trip to Newark or New York City. And the capacity of the trains was extremely limited with only one passenger car and I've read a single flat car to haul parcels. And when the locomotives were not running in the middle of the day, there were two round trips made between Newark and Orange on the horse-drawn car. Again, not a lot of capacity. It was said that when the car was full, they would put out hang boards off the side of the car, like old-time running boards on a car, and the male passengers were expected to stand on the boards and hold on tight while the horse car trundled back and forth between Newark and Orange. Pleasant enough on a summer day, I should imagine, but quite brutal in the winter. Next slide, please. Here is a map showing the railroads west of Morristown in the Denville and Rockaway area. This is the later map, but you can quite clearly see the Morris and Essex coming through. There is a branch line going off to Boonton, and the blue line here is the Morris Canal. And as you can see, there are several connections between the Morris Canal and the railroads that serve the local iron mines. Now, you would think that with the iron traffic now available, the Morris and Essex's fortunes would change, but the railroad was still not earning all that much money. Next slide, please. And the railroad reached the city of Dover in 1848. Here you can see the Morris Canal running through the city of Dover. Next slide. And again, there was large facilities. There was the turntable and engine house, passenger depot, water tank, and there was somewhere in here there would have been a freight depot, which is not shown on this map. Next slide. And speaking of Dover, this is the one of the other early locomotives. I believe this was the fourth one on the railroad. The Dover, completed in 1841. You can see it has a very it is very similar to the Speedwell, with the addition of a pair of trailing wheels under the cab that help support the weight of the boiler. Now, there's some evidence that this locomotive was built by the Baldwin Locomotive Works, sent to the Speedwell Iron Works because the was found to be unsatisfactory. Baldwin owed the Stephen Vale and Speedwell a debt for iron that they had sold him. So they swapped the partially completed locomotive for their debt. So the Dover was at least partially constructed at the Speedwell Iron Works. Next slide, please. Now, these are all very small locomotives. And in 1848, there were only two passenger trains from Dover and a single freight train with a passenger car attached. So even though there were a number of growing and prosperous towns, Dover, Morristown, Madison, Denville, and the Oranges, of course, there still wasn't a tremendous amount of, there still were not a large number of trains serving these communities, basically 3 trains a day. Next slide. Now let's turn our attention from the western end of the line to Newark. And this is a 1830s era map of Newark. You can see the New Jersey Railroad and Transportation Company coming north into the city from New Brunswick, and then crossing the Passaic River to Jersey City. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to enlarge the middle of the map. So what was happening is the Morris and Essex Railroad was coming into Newark from the west. They were going through the central part of Newark, meeting the New Jersey Railroad and Transportation Company coming up from New Brunswick, and then heading out of the city to Jersey City. The citizens of Newark did not like the idea of a locomotive belching smoke and cinders going right through the middle of their city. So they, in the early years at least, they required the locomotive be uncoupled and horses attached to the passenger cars to haul them through the city of Newark to the connection with the New Jersey Railroad and Transportation Company, where they would be coupled onto another train. Next slide, please. which would head across the Meadowlands to the city of Jersey City. And you can see here in this engraving showing the city of Newark. The Newark is across the Passaic River. You see the docks on the river where boats could dock, the bridge over the river, and then the train heading over the Meadowlands to the Hackensack River and Jersey City. Next slide. And this is New Jersey City in 1854. And what is interesting about this particular illustration is you can see the railroads coming in from the west over obviously some wetlands. And then the city itself was concentrated along the Hudson waterfront. There were some large industries, as you can see, but everything was located where there was dry land. And you can see the Morris Canal coming in on the right. Next slide, please. And here is a engraving showing Jersey City in the 1850s. Next slide, please. And here is the view of the city of New York from Jersey City. And you can see right away that this was a very convenient place for anyone who wanted to travel to New York City. We are directly across from Lower Manhattan at the time. And on the right side of the screen, you could see steam ferries already in operation, shuttling passengers and cargo between Jersey City and Manhattan. Next slide, please. And one of the reasons why Jersey City is difficult to serve with railroads is that, as you know, Bergen Hill runs down the spine of that peninsula between the Hudson and Hackensack rivers. So this dark reddish line you see, or the you can see a line, the railroad coming west out of Jersey City, having to go through Bergen Hill before it can continue on to the west. And of course, that cut through Bergen Hill is still used today by the railroads. It's located in the Five Corners neighborhood of Jersey City, which you see on the right-hand side of the screen. Next slide, please. And here is a map showing the New Jersey and Railroad and Transportation Company's facilities on the Jersey City waterfront. There was a rather large freight terminal, a large passenger terminal, a ferry dock, a roundhouse, and turntable for locomotives. Next slide. Now, this is a rather famous American painting. It shows one of the rural stations of the Morris and Essex Railroad about the time of the Civil War. I think this is 1864. You can see the train coming into the station. There are passengers waiting on the platform. Are stagecoaches and carriages that are waiting to take passengers to their final destinations. There's a herd of sheep being driven across the tracks, but you could also see a freight car in the background that was no doubt delivering goods and commodities for the local town. Next slide, please. And ultimately, this is what the Morris and Essex Railroad looked like when it was taken over by the Lackawanna Railroad. And this was in 1868. You can see orange right here. There is a line that now goes all the way across the state of New Jersey to Phillipsburg on the Delaware River. And there's also the Sussex Railroad, which connected to it, going all the way up to McAfee and Branchville. And there is another route the Boonton line, which again is still used by New Jersey Transit to serve the towns of Boonton, Wayne, Lincoln Park. Next slide, please. Okay, so the one major step forward was that horses are no longer pulling trains through Newark, but between 1850 and 1860, the population of Orange rose 102.4%. So it just doubled. And for a community that was growing like this, the let's just say casual service provided by the Morris and Essex was really becoming increasingly frustrating. So we see a letter to the New York Times in August of 1853 complaining that there's not enough seats on the Saturday afternoon trains. On the 4th of July, a day that people were traveling, a train was left in Newark where the passengers broiled in the sun for nearly an hour. He was complaining that sometimes a train going out of Newark and going up the hill to Summit would stall, slide back, and be forced to try again as many as 4 or 5 times. Again, in the same month, another letter to the New York Times claims that a train stalled at the Hackensack River drawbridge. Now, why would a train stall at the Hackensack River drawbridge? Because there was a curve leading up to the drawbridge, and apparently the additional friction or resistance provided by that curve was too much for the locomotive. We see a complaint that a train took 4 hours to travel the 33 miles between Jersey City and Morristown. On another occasion, a train got stalled on the hill, had to wait for a helper engine to arrive from Jersey City to push it up over the hill into what is today the town of Summit. Next slide, please. More complaints. This letter writer complains that the most popular passenger train left Morristown at 8:20, but did not passengers would not arrive in New York City until 10:15, almost 2 hours later. Remember, the cars had to be uncoupled from the Morris and Essex locomotive, shunted over to the New Jersey Railroad and Transportation Company, coupled onto one of their trains for the final trip to Jersey City. And that was always adding extra time. If the train had freight cars in its they would be stopping to handle freight, or they'd be stopping to load parcels at the local stations, which created even more delays. And then came the panic of 1857. Already we had people commuting from Orange, but the price of a commutation ticket increased by 50%. Now, I don't know about you, but I would be pretty upset if the price of my New Jersey Transit ticket increased by 50%. And I think the people in Orange were very, very annoyed by this. They also increased the price of a single trip fare somewhere between 12 and 15 cents, which was, of course, quite a lot of money in 1857. So, what had been a strained relationship between the Morris and Essex Railroad and the city of Orange was now reaching its breaking point. Next slide, please. So, in 1858, the town of Orange, or the people of Orange, decided to take matters into their own hands. It began when they sent a deputation to the offices of the Morris and Essex, and they reportedly received scant courtesy. I'm not quite sure what that means, but obviously they were very unhappy. So they founded an omnibus line, the Newark and Orange and Newark Omnibus makes its inaugural trip on April 1st, 1858. There was enough public dissatisfaction that there was also support for the founding of the Orange and Newark horse car line a year later in 1859, and the first cars to reach Newark ran in 1860. Now, this is the important bit because fares were 5 cents less than the Morris and Essex, and the annual commutation fare was $25 as opposed to $32. Supposedly, during the first year of operation, the Orange and Newark carried 100,000 passengers. However, the Morris and Essex Railroad supposedly only carried 75,000 passengers. So the dissatisfaction with the Morris and Essex caused the people of Orange to create their own two alternatives, which, if we can believe these numbers, were quite successful. Now, on the right side of the screen, you see an advertisement of for from an omnibus manufacturer in New York City. So the omnibus running on the Orange and Newark omnibus line would probably have looked something like this. Next slide, please. Nevertheless, there were more problems. One of the In 1865, we have a public meeting and the appointment of a committee. Now, the residents of Orange had no real alternative to the Morris and Essex. They felt particularly vulnerable to the railroad's lax safety practice. And this committee was really there to push the Morris and Essex to improve its practices and to improve its service. Now, there was a rather serious accident. There was a rather long train coming out of Jersey City, passing through the tunnel under Bergen Hill. The train was a mixed train with freight cars in the front by the locomotive and passenger cars in the rear. The train had stopped in the tunnel, which was not unexpected. Frequently, trains did have to wait there. But when the train started up again, one of the couplings snapped, leaving the passenger cars sitting in the tunnel where they were invisible to an oncoming train. Fortunately, a brakeman ran back, tried to stop the Erie train that was following. The train did not stop in time. There was a rear end collision. There weren't many injuries, but it was the sort of thing that the people of Orange were very upset about and felt, again, the word is vulnerable to these lax operating practices. Now, in 1868, we finally get to more trains. We have 15 daily trains, but commuters are still complaining about the service. Passenger trains were said to be kept waiting for coal trains, and there were complaints that the station in Orange was too small for the growing traffic. So the result was the construction of the Watchung Railroad under the leadership of David N. Ropes, who was a member of the Vigilance Committee. Now, the Watchung Railroad was chartered as a horse car line with the option of constructing a conventional steam railroad. The picture on the right shows a horse car in the 1870s in the city of Newark, New Jersey. So this is what the Watchung Railroad would originally have looked like. Next slide, please. So I want to talk very briefly about just how vulnerable towns were to a single or monopolistic railroad like the Morris and Essex. You've only got one railroad serving the town, so you are really very dependent on that railroad for just about everything. And one of the things that you were dependent on was coal. Coal was used for blacksmiths, coal was used for heating. If you had a stationary steam boiler in a factory or workshop, you needed coal to run that. So coal was an extremely important commodity, and the only way to get it to your town was to have it delivered by the railroad. Next slide, please. Here is a coal tipple in the town of Bloomfield. You can see it's quite substantial. This photograph was taken by the Bloomfield Improvement Association in the early 1900s. But you can see just how big these structures were where coal was being delivered for the town's use. Next slide. So it wasn't only passengers who were suffering from the competition. So George Spottiswoode of Orange, he was an English immigrant, served in the Civil War. But after serving in the war, he sets up a coal yard near the Morrison Essex Railroad Depot, 1866. At this point, the railroad had crossed New Jersey and was serving the Pennsylvania coal fields. The timing was perfect. So he was selling Lehigh and Scranton coal until 1876, when the railroad refused to deliver Scranton coal anymore. I think what they're referring to as anthracite as opposed to bituminous. The railroad refused, but right or wrong, the railroad refused to deliver this coal. Oh, and by the way, they're increasing the rates on the Lehigh coal. So now, in response, Spottiswoode contracts with the Watchung Railroad for deliveries and establishes a new coal yard. And after facing the competition in the coal delivery business, the Lackawanna Railroad or the Morrison Essex Railroad changes its policy and began providing competitive service. But it took the construction of a second coal yard on a second railroad to get the Lackawanna to cooperate and deliver the coal that Spottiswoode needed. And if you look at the man's advertisement on the left side of the screen, you see that he's got two coal yards, one served by the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western Railroad, and one served on the Orange branch of the Erie Railroad. Next slide, please. In looking through the 1907 souvenir booklet of celebrating the 100th anniversary of the East Orange, we see a number of fascinating photographs. And I have this one here to remind you that another absolutely vital commodity that was being delivered by the railroads was hay for horses. Next slide, please. And this describes the Thomas Burley's livery stable. So he was offering rental of horses and buggies, or horses and rigs, as he's calling them. He's advertising boarding horses, saying that he's got a good, safe, and responsible place to leave your horse. Um, he was offering boarding. It's a really very big building, 50 by 150 feet, and two stories, excuse me. Next slide, please. And here's another boarding and livery stable in the Oranges. And you notice you can hire a coach, or you can hire a station wagon, you can hire a surrey. Um, They were steam heated, so they needed coal and they needed hay and they needed all of these commodities to stay in business. And this is not a small little stable off on a side street somewhere. This is a fairly large, major business that provided a lot of different services for the town. Next slide, please. Apparently, riding for recreation was also popular in the Oranges at the time. Here's a great advertisement for ladies' coats and ladies' riding habits, which was supposedly a speciality of this particular tailor's. Um, but if you're going to have a horse, you have to have your hay delivered to keep your horse fed. Next slide. Now, in 1886, Edison's arrival changes everything. And this is the factory at which Thomas Edison was manufacturing lamps. So, what was happening is when Edison, Thomas Edison's original business model was to do research and development, obtain a patent, sell the patent rights or license the patent rights, and make money to reinvest in creating more inventions and more patents and more patent rights. It was a great business model, but it um, Edison realized that he was by not manufacturing the things that he was patenting, he was missing out on a lot of potential revenue. There was also a number of other inventors setting up shop in New Jersey. At the time, Edward Weston in Newark was emerging as a major electrical inventor and electrical scientist. And Edison's laboratory at Menlo Park was no longer able to keep up. So Edison moves to West Orange and he brings with him, or at the time, he sets up manufacturing. One of the things he's manufacturing are light bulbs. He's also going to manufacture phonographs. He's also going to manufacture the movie film. He's going to take advantage of his patents to um, bring in extra revenue by manufacturing things himself, like batteries and electrical components. And this photograph from the 1880s, or this engraving, excuse me, from the 1880s, shows the light bulb manufacturing. Next slide, please. And this has absolutely nothing to do with railroads, has absolutely nothing to do with the Orange Branch, but Edison Mazda lamps employed the American illustrator and artist Maxfield Parrish to create some of the most beautiful advertising art ever created. On the left, we see the lamp lighters of Venice, and on the right, we see Cleopatra. I just love these, and I had to include a few of them in this presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, so when Edison comes in, this creates a very sharp dividing line. There was not a lot of freight traffic originating on the Orange Branch, but Edison's decision to set up manufacturing in West Orange now meant that there was going to be freight traffic. Now, Bill McKelvey is going to argue that Edison's presence created what economists call the economics of clustering. So there is Edison building, inventing, manufacturing electrical devices, the skilled workforce that it develops as a result, the network of suppliers, other manufacturers can now move in and start also building electrical um, building electronics manufacturing. So we had the manufacture of automobile horns. We had General Electric moving in. We had a number of other manufacturers, the Frank Sprague Company. all attracted to West Orange and the Oranges by the presence of Edison's laboratory and enabled the communities to grow. And for our purposes today, enabled the railroad to now start seriously hauling freight traffic. It's one thing to bring in ice and hay and coal for local consumption. It's quite another thing to be servicing manufacturing that has nationwide or a nationwide customer base. So here are two photographs showing just some of the industries that grew up along the Orange Branch, the Delco car battery plant on the left, and the Charms Candy Company on the right. And I'll leave the discussion of this idea to Bill McKelvey when he is going to do his presentation. Next slide, please. Passenger service will cease in 1966, but freight service will continue. And I included this photograph. This shows just some of the buildings that Edison created to manufacture his inventions. So, a major production facility, major industrial site that was served by the Orange Branch and provided employment and economic opportunity for a lot of local people. Next slide, please. Now, the Lackawanna Railroad, formerly the Morris and Essex, began a very ambitious program of rebuilding. And one of the things was the elimination of grade crossing. So here you see building a trench through Orange that is going on Orange and Summit, I believe, that is going to eliminate grade crossings. That will enable their trains to operate faster. And this was photograph dates to around 1910. Faster trains meant more competition for the Orange Branch. Next slide, please. And of course, at the end of the 1920s, they introduced the electrically powered multiple unit cars that enabled, they had very good performance. They were very fast. They're very clean compared to a steam locomotive, state of the art passenger service. Now, I did read a story about a man who lived in Orange, and he had a choice of going to the Orange Branch and taking a Erie train, or going to the Lackawanna and taking one of these electrical trains. And now this guy apparently was the type of person who likes to sleep as late as humanly possible, grab his breakfast while running out the door. But rather than running to the closer Orange Branch trains, he, with his breakfast in his mouth, would hop over the neighbors' fences and running through their backyards because the Lackawanna was so much faster. Next slide, please. Of course, the Orange Branch did continue to provide passenger service, but in competition with the Lackawanna, they were never quite as successful. So the focus of the Orange Branch would eventually shift entirely to freight. Next slide, please. So just some final thoughts. When we look at the Morris and Essex Railroad, we see a railroad that should have been hugely successful, but it took a long time for that railroad to become profitable. It was a monopoly, and in any confrontation or any disagreement with the people of the Oranges, the Morris and Essex was always going to emerge on top. They had the upper hand. There was simply no other way to get these vital commodities into your town and to get people out of your town. This ultimately forced the people of Orange to take matters into their own hands, to establish first a competing omnibus line, then a competing horse car line, and finally a competing railroad, the Watchung Railroad under David Ropes. And both railroads ultimately are going to contribute to the success and the growth of the towns along their line. And it was an interesting thought that here on the left, we see the light rail construction in northern New Jersey. And you see right at the north end of Branch Brook Park, the line turns westward along the Orange Branch, and we are still connecting Orange and Newark, just like in the 1830s. That uh, line between Orange and Newark is still there, still serving passengers, still serving the communities. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. There is a book from Garbelli Publishing available. And of course, I'll be at the Greenwood Village of Greenwood Lake Public Library tomorrow, where I'm going to be talking about the entire um, Montclair and Greenwood Lake Railroad, and not just the Orange Branch. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to this group and to contribute what little I do know about the origins of the Orange Branch.
Thank you, Kevin, for this truly comprehensive presentation. Do you have a minute to stay, just in case people have questions?
Yes, that's no problem.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to ask a question of Kevin? Just unmute yourself. Well,
I have a question.
please,
Hmm?
welcome.
Please.
First of all, Kevin, thank you so much. I wanted to ask you, I once told this story to Darren that when I was a teenager, I took a train from the Highland Avenue station in Orange, where I lived, and I took it to Binghamton, New York. And it was about 1963. And I've never really been able to find out anything about that. I remember when I was a kid and walked down to the station, they said, "Oh, you're taking the Phoebe Snow." Then on the return trip, which I mean, Binghamton was just my first stop, I found a Greyhound bus. But on my return trip, the train wasn't running any longer. I think it just had been suspended. And I ended up on a milk run that took me someplace into Passaic. It took about 12 hours. Is there any research on that?
Now it sounds like you were sounds like you would have gone to Hoboken. Now I can't remember if that would have been a direct at that point, but you definitely would have gotten the Phoebe Snow to Binghamton from Hoboken. And whenever the train wasn't running on the way back, I couldn't say, but yeah, the Erie Railroad also served that part of New York State, and they would have their milk train would have run through Suffern, New York, down through Bergen County, and through Passaic onto Hoboken or Jersey City. Again, I'm not sure if they would have been, if you could have gotten directly to Jersey City directly to Hoboken at that point, or was the Erie still using Jersey City? So, yeah, I could think of a lot of railroad enthusiasts who would have loved to have been on that trip, but it sounds like you found it very inconvenient.
No, oh no, I love the trip there. The way
Okay.
home was a bit difficult because I had no idea where I was going, and I was 16. And it got in at around 9 o'clock at night, and I asked where, I recognized I was someplace familiar in New Jersey, and the conductor told me, and I just got off somewhere and found a payphone and called my aunt who lived in Clifton. But it was hard on the way back. There's no food, there's no water. It was 10 hours, but the ride was, I love the ride on the way over. It was great. So I think in the mists of time, I'd forgotten that I must have gone to Hoboken and then transferred.
Yeah, that sounds like
So that
most.
leads me to another question. When did trains start going to Hoboken? Because, taking that train so frequently to the Hudson, I would take them in high school to the Hudson Tubes.
Yeah.
And the Hudson Tubes were Jersey City or Hoboken?
Both. They served Hoboken, they served Jersey City. So Hoboken, Jersey City, and Newark were all served by the Hudson Tubes. But of course, most of the traffic would have been Jersey City and Hoboken to Lower Manhattan. Yeah, I rode them like you. I rode them when I was 16. But I going to New York City. But I'm not really sure when the station in Hoboken was first created. That would have been, it would have had to have been after the 1870s. Something I'd have to look up.
Well, it's really fascinating. I mean, even in Cavalier and Clay, Michael Chabon's novel, they speak
Mhm.
so extensively about, and I once looked it up, just how many ferries there were along the
Yeah.
Hudson. I mean, they ran up and down with stops that I had never heard of. So I also remember in 1950, at my parents taking their new car, very exciting, and going by ferry into New York from Hoboken. They still had the ferries where you could put a car on it.
Mm.
But this was wonderful.
Well, thank you. Glad I could help.
Thank you, Carol. Good to see you. Well, actually, Carol's question reminded me of one other thing I want to mention. We're recording oral histories of the Orange Branch, so for those who have memories of growing up next to this line, riding this line, working on this line, please reach out to us at history@theorangebranch.com. Um, are there any other questions? I don't want to
I
keep.
think there was something on chat.
Thank you
I
for
saw
that.
something about support. Was there
How
something
much
on?
public support? This is a question from Rachel. How much public support for passenger service was there prior to 1970 compared to today?
Mm, that is a good question. I think you know this is really when this is really when the post-war highway construction boom reached its practical limit. This is the time that transfer this is the time when people began looking around and saying, "Hey, wait a minute, maybe putting everyone in a car and driving to work in the city is not a good idea." I think this was the time people said that the world's longest parking lot was the Long Island Expressway. So there was a growing awareness that we needed to keep our passenger rail, our commuter passenger rail infrastructure and improve it. This is also when the state of New Jersey really began seriously making long-term plans for better passenger rail to unite the system, to upgrade, to build a more coordinated, if you will, transportation infrastructure. I don't know how much public support there was for this. Obviously, the railroads were losing a lot of money on passenger service. It's extremely expensive to haul people around as opposed to freight. Freight doesn't object when it's late and it doesn't complain when the couplers close too hard or the braking is too abrupt. But passenger commuter rail was a big money loser for the railroads. They were looking to have the state take it over. And this was just at the time that the states were beginning to say, this is, we've got to keep this infrastructure there. We may not make any money, but it'll be cheaper than building more and more and more highways and more parking. So public support, I don't know, but the government was certainly thinking very seriously about it.
Well, thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate you
Oh,
coming
my
on.
pleasure.
And I look forward to your presentation tomorrow.
Okay.
Well, everyone, have a wonderful rest of your day and hope to see you next month. Take care, Kevin.
All right. Take care.